Hi, everyone. Ariana Friedlander here with Rosabella Consulting, and welcome to the Co-Creators in Conversation interview series, where we celebrate leaders who are challenging the status quo and creating economic value by genuinely caring about their people. Right now, I am so excited to be speaking with Anjali Leon, the agility coach and consultant at PPL Coach. Welcome, Anjali. It's so fantastic to have you on the show.
Thank you, Ariana. And thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
And the slip of the tongue was actually a good thing because I do see myself as a people first person. So when you said people before agility, you're not too far from the truth.
Well, I think that's where my mind was going because I do know you so well enough to know that you are a people first person. At least that's been my experience. And I wonder, to help listeners out, if you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do with PPL Coach.
Sure. So I call myself an agility coach and consultant. And through that, I go into companies and help them identify new ways of working to kind of navigate all of the change that we're experiencing in our business world and in our world in general. And in addition to that, I also do some professional coaching, one-on-one coaching, both for people who are kind of navigating some new careers, particularly in the agile space, so Scrum Masters, product owners, leaders in this space, and then just general life coaching. So that's another element of what I do. But otherwise, I consider myself, I guess, an entrepreneur. I run my own practice, and I've learned to be a business person in the process of doing what I do as well.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear. And I think your experience is, a common one where we start maybe in one field, like with agility coaching and really working on developing a specific skill among an individual or team. And then seeing like there's this overlap, though, that we also kind of have to address. And if there's something happening in a personal life that is making it harder to adopt a new practice like agility and technology development, then we need to address that before we can really internalize that new practice.
I think they're all linked. How do we show up as our full selves, which involve our personal, very much the things that that are going on in our personal lives. We bring that to our work. Mm-hmm. And so we absolutely cannot ignore that. It's all tied together, and then we bring the work into our home and family lives, and we can't ignore that either. And so I think with agile ways of working and these new ways of working, I find that a lot of those strategies are applicable even to our personal lives, and I find myself applying a lot of those into just how I lead my life.
Can you give us an example of what that looks like, how you apply these practices commonly viewed as great for developing the next, technology fad that's going to make waves? How do you apply that to your personal life? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I think a big core of agile ways of working, or these new ways of working, is to approach things in an iterative manner, and to kind of plan our strategies around, iterations. And so one of the things that I do, I just even plan my own weeks using that thought process. So Sunday evenings are my opportunity to kind of plan for the week ahead. So I kind of manage all of the stuff that's coming up and prioritize that work and think about what I need to tackle first. And so there's kind of a focus for that week. Mm-hmm. And actually, right before I do that on a Sunday evening, I just look back and see what I've done this past week, and I was able to accomplish what I set out to do. So that that kind of model that we often use in our on our teams, our agile teams, where we think of things in terms of sprints. I bring that into my just personal way of managing my home and work priorities.
Yeah, I mean, that is so cool to hear, and mirrors the approach that I see works for my clients and myself as well, to approach planning as an iterative process, something that you do consistently, and you start it with reflecting first. And I think so quickly we often go to just forward thinking, future thinking with our plans, and don't really harvest some of the wonderful insights from our recent past experiences to inform how to set a trajectory up to succeed in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And then reflecting back, you see, how far you've come to. It's kind of a motivator,
right,
to, what you step into next.
Yeah, right, for sure. And I think that that's especially helpful for combating things like negativity bias, where we can just give a lot more credence and attention and focus on the negative or the bad or what could have gone better, than recognizing and elevating the evidence of what's going well, what's working right. That can make it hard. We can start to fixate on those pieces.
Totally.
Yeah. I wonder, one of the things that we've talked about personally before is because you are such a people-centered coach and provider. And, I always think that for those of us that are serving in that way and giving in that capacity, it's also so important to maintain our own well-being and to model those things for ourselves. And I wonder what your experience is like in taking care of yourself and addressing yourself as a whole person in your business as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Actually just stepping into entrepreneurial life has been kind of such a joyous thing for me. And so for a few years after I started my own independent practice, I was just riding on a high
Nice.
from, the freedom and energy that just comes from being a master of your own destiny. And so things kind of shifted when COVID hit for us. Okay. So, initially when COVID hit, I again went into higher gear in terms of all of my, my entrepreneurial leanings came out, and I was starting to think of new ideas and how we can navigate these new times. And then I think through all of that, I wasn't really paying attention to myself. And about a few months in, as a matter of fact, it did hit me. And it hit me in a very debilitating way. If I can reflect back and think about what happened at that point in time. But so a lot of things started to emerge, and what I realized is that not taking care of yourself throughout, even when things are going well, will, at some point might come back to hit you, which had been what happened for me, actually, I think for a lot of 2021, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I think that is a common experience and struggle in the last few years in particular, and especially, for those that saw these changes and wanted to take proactive steps to pivot and modify our businesses and how we were providing services to fit those needs. And I don't know for you, but I realized for myself in the last few years too, that I had these routines, that were pretty set with this is how I take care of myself. And then this is, where I go to refuel professionally. And a lot of those routines were upended. And so that was hard. But then on top of it, the isolation and the stress and anxiety of the situation just also made me feel like my self-care regimen needed to be twice as big. To help me recover. So I'm curious for you, it sounds like you kind of saw these changes, said, okay, we're going to pivot, we're going to change. You felt like that was coming from a place of strength from what I hear. And then you hit this wall that became debilitating. Can you bring us into what that experience was like for you?
It's it started out with just, what can I call it? Feeling like meh.
Okay.
And I didn't quite know what was going on, and I just, kind of continued my regular routine, and then it came to a point where I started feeling the stress was heightened. I started to feel anxiety that I had not really experienced before in my body, and that led to anxiety when I was doing things that I wouldn't, that were common practice for me, or facilitating a session or running a workshop, and that started like really affecting me in terms of my confidence. So it just felt like, quite a I didn't know what to expect, because this was an unfamiliar feeling,
right?
And I wanted to get out of it.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, what can I do to get out of it? And then how long is this going to last? And I thought, oh, everybody else says that they need to take a break. So I'm going to take a break. I am going to give myself some time to recover. And I put even a time box that this is my period for recovery. And after that, I'm going to go back to, the way things have always been. So I did create that space myself to recover. But, what should I say? Like, my plan, well, the saying goes, right? Man plans and gods laugh. So in this case, the same thing happened to me. So I had this time box of when everything was going to go back to the way it had always been, and that didn't quite work that way. But in the meantime, I started paying much more attention to taking care of myself. So taking more walks, setting up time to meet with friends, taking some, nutritional supplements. I realized that I was indoors a lot. So I got some blood tests done and noticed that there might be some need for some vitamin D, and so all kinds of things that actually, like, I think all the little pieces worked together, and I started to feel better, but it did take some time.
Yeah, I think it does seem that way, where we might set a course and say, okay, I've got 5 days or 5 weeks or whatever to deal with this amorphous thing that I've never experienced before, but I know I don't like, and it's unfamiliar and I want to change. And then the reality can look so different than that. And I just want to honor the courage it took to share your story with us, because I do think that it is so relatable, and something I know I've struggled with myself. And I know we've talked about that before, but we don't talk about it openly that often, right? With other people. And I think that that's part of that challenge. And from what I hear, your experience was, it kind of started with this meh feeling, or I think Adam Grant would call that languishing, right? He wrote a pretty viral article about how, COVID was leading to languishing. And then it just like builds from there into things that would normally maybe bring you joy, or just be a place of confidence, leading to anxiety instead. I think that's all so kind of relatable. And I just want to pause and encourage anyone that might be listening to sit with, like, how does that resonate for experiences that you've had in the past or in the present? Can you identify with that? Because I know I can identify with that feeling of, who is this person?
Exactly. It was like I was watching somebody whom I did not recognize. And resisting that. And the resistance just made it worse. So
what were the ways you would resist it? Like, because I feel like that's one of those things in the moment we think we're doing the right thing when we're resisting, certain kinds of feelings or sensations. But then in retrospect, we can look back and say, oh, that was actually resistance and that wasn't helpful.
Yeah. Even just thinking that that's not me. Or, using language like I have to get back on, it's time to get back on the horse. Right. Or, okay, I'm going to take this time for a break and I'm giving myself 1 month to get over this.
Right.
Without any compassion for myself. I would never do that if somebody else in my circle came and told me that they were feeling that way. And that's how I reacted to me feeling that way.
Right. Where do you think that drive came from to react that way initially?
Oh, I think that it is our conditioning. I've always been an achiever. There's nothing that cannot be overcome. There's always striving towards excellence. That's the way I was raised. That's the way that's what drove me. That's what fulfilled me. And here is this person who cannot do those things. Like it was literally. Now I recognize it as it wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't. It was a depletion.
Right.
I even sometimes refer to it as like I don't have a spark anymore. And that was incredibly frustrating for me because that's what I brought I found that that's what I brought to the table. In my conversations with other people, I sparked something for them.
Yeah.
I sparked something for us. And I couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And you don't know if it'll ever come back. And that's a pretty scary place to be. And it scared me as an entrepreneur.
Right.
Here I was, I didn't have, running your own business, you're dependent on yourself, especially a consulting practice.
Yep.
It's you are the product. And if you aren't able to bring your value proposition to the table, how would I, I had fear of how I would go forward.
Yeah.
So all of that came into play and just made things more scary and
yeah, that's so relatable again, I think, and just that way we resist with putting pressure on ourselves or the expectation of, oh, you got to get over this isn't you, such subtle words and language that we say to ourselves, but it really does feed that resistance and make it so hard to move through. And then the fear comes in to the, oh no, how am I gonna be a successful entrepreneur if I'm not bringing the spark, if that part of myself that's always been reliably there for me and for my clients doesn't deliver. I wonder, like, how, so you kind of set aside some time, you made going for walks, talking to friends a priority for yourself, taking care of your body, nourishing your body. What helped you shift? What helped you start to see like hope for that this wasn't always going to be the way? And I'm curious too, like you mentioned resistance before. I can't help but wonder, what was there a role surrender played?
Oh, that was a turning point.
Okay.
So I wanted to also add that I actually started, for my work-wise, I started taking on less. So I started clearing my plate a little bit,
right,
and reaching the amount of work that was sustainable for me as where I was at. So giving myself that room and not judging it, and then accepting this as part of my experience, my lived experience.
Right.
all of this, the lack of confidence or the diminishing confidence, the anxiety, that was an experience that I was having.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a human experience. And that was okay. I was getting a chance to experience something new. That sense of surrender
Mm-hmm.
and acceptance of that as part of me,
Right.
was like, that was the liberation.
Yeah. And it sounds like a little bit of a reframe too, instead of this isn't me and I'm foreign to myself, of I'm getting to have a new experience here. And it,
Yeah.
you know, it might not be the ride I decided to go on at Disneyland, but it is a ride that is illuminating and helping me see things in a new way. And I can embrace that at the very
I can
least.
embrace that. I can be empathetic towards other people who might be experiencing it. And you know, there's a gift in it. I felt like there is a gift in what the universe has given me this year. How can I be accepting of that gift?
Right.
So just sharing this with you as a and just kind of reflecting back on that experience is in itself a gift.
Right.
So I
agree.
That
I think it's very generous of you, for the audience and for us, and hopefully for yourself as well. Reflecting back, and I that's, you know, that language of this is a gift. You know, I think that's one of the reasons why we, you know, swim in similar circles together, is that I think resonates for both of us. And it's just interesting too. We, you know, you talked about this, the resistance, and part of what I hear surrender meaning for you is receiving the gift. And I think that's another pattern that we struggle with, especially professionals, and maybe particularly professional women in particular, just like receiving care, receiving support, receiving an opportunity to allow yourself to experience something new and different and scary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And talking about the gifts, I have to acknowledge my female friends who were just there.
Yeah.
So I had this regular engagement with a few friends. We would just do some collaborative stuff together. And during that time, I felt like I wasn't bringing anything to the table, you know, in terms of creativity, in terms of new ideas. But they still, every week we met, and whoever I showed up as, however I showed up, was perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I am so grateful for that. And it's the women in my life who did that for me.
Right. Yeah. And it's so important. I think we need those spaces, those places, those people that will accept us as we are. And we don't have to bring a facade, and act like everything's perfect. And I feel like that's especially a pressure that we experience as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as you know, someone who is solely responsible for your own income. It can be so easy to fall into that trap of gotta act like everything's perfect, can't show a crack.
And that pressure was still there.
I know. I wonder, as you say that, like, how did you navigate that pressure? So, you know, you were able to take a month off, which is wonderful, but you couldn't take just years off. Like you know, still were performing and working with clients at a lower load than you were before. So what else helped you navigate this time when providing, work with clients?
I had to prioritize big time.
Yeah.
So all of the engagements in terms of speaking at conferences, speaking at meetups was something that I had to just say no to.
Yeah.
I had to say no to, or not yet, to other opportunities that came up in terms of work. So there was a lot of things that I either passed on to somebody else, or let the client know that I didn't have the capacity to do it that year. So I just kind of, I had to prioritize big time. And with the clients that I did work with, I had to double down, on the back end to show up in the way that they needed me to.
I wonder, were there things that helped you show up? Like, were there things that helped you find a little bit of the spark for yourself before you showed up that you would do?
Yeah. So I had already been doing, meditation practice in the morning. And so that became really, really important for me to do every single day. Yeah. And then I'd take a walk in the morning. And then that walk actually turned to, I started like jogging and running. And I realized that when I was doing that, my energy, was up, and that really helped me get through the day. And I realized it was like kind of raising my heart rate.
Yeah.
And I've heard that it kind of just also builds serotonin in your body. And so that might have contributed to that. But those two things made a big difference for me, and just, how the rest of my day went. I also, my sister gifted me a standing desk at some point during the year. And so I started using that more. And so that, again, just kind of movement, a lot of movement in my day helped a lot. And so now that I'm feeling a lot better, I'm making sure that I keep those still going. Yeah. I think my biggest learning is like, don't wait for you to get to a point where you have to kind of put, all of your energy into rebalancing as that established, and keep that balance throughout. Yeah. So all of those things that I started to incorporate into my life last year are now, intentionally part of my regular practice.
Yeah. And that's part of the gift too.
That's part of the gift.
Right. Yes. Is, because of this experience, I've leaned into these other practices that are, so helpful in other ways. And I always like to say, my work with clients is the importance of getting out of our heads, out of my head and into my body for me. And it sounds like that's part of your experience as well, as, when we start to move our bodies, and especially move with more vigor, it just like it helps everything flow. There is just something about when our hearts are beating faster and things are just flowing through our bodies more, that it is this cathartic emotional release.
That's been my experience. Yeah, it's fascinating, but that's been my experience.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to hear, like, part of your surrender was to acknowledge for yourself, this is who I am. This is part of my story, and that you don't have to let the story end there, right? It's not just, now Anjali's just this anxious person. It's this is part of my story, and I'm going to write it in the way that feels best for me, but not let it be this, the end of the story.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for me, that's also influenced how I want to work going forward. I've always had, the mission is to, how do we get to better business outcomes and our collective well-being? And now I'm amping up the collective well-being part.
Yeah.
And finding ways to incorporate it in my coaching, in my training, and it'll just, my attention is there. So, it's kind of building, but I want that to be to be important in the work that I do.
And the need is there too. I think we're seeing that more and more, with there being these experiences just around burnout or, just people having limited bandwidth, needing support in their own well-being. And I think we have a generation of professionals that have been entering the workforce that are more vocal of those needs, more capable of giving voice to their inner experiences, their emotional experiences, and in doing so, advocating for their needs as well. So I see great opportunity there.
I am glad that you are seeing that with the young people entering the workforce. I worry, for the young people entering the workforce in these times where it's all virtual, and the opportunities to have somebody mentor you or take you under your wing or observe what's going on for you when you're not in a meeting feels a little bit lost for me. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how do we create the space for if they are being vocal, they definitely are more open to being vocal, but how do we create the space and the opportunity for them to express themselves?
That's a really good point. And actually a good segue into the question I always like to wrap up interviews with, which is, what does it look like or mean to co-create in your work? Because I can't imagine creating a space like that independently. So I don't know if that relates or if there's another way that you find yourself co-creating in your work.
So as far as the work place, I think I'm much more intentional. I've always thought of my relationship to my clients as a partnership. Mm-hmm. And now it's much more intentional about not even proposing something, but just creating the space where we can start from scratch together. And the complementary capabilities that we bring to the table have, I've seen huge value in taking that approach, and even in terms of ownership on the client's part in owning whatever it is that we're creating together.
Right. Yeah.
But
a lot of sense.
On the personal front, I'm much more intentional about pairing with other coaches. It's a lonely place to be an entrepreneur,
Right.
And so, opportunities to work with somebody else on an initiative is something that I'm being much more intentional about. So just recently, I did a class on professional Kanban with a fellow coach and a really good friend, and it was so. I think even the participants got a lot out of our two styles and personalities mixing together for their benefit.
Nice.
But just for me, and hopefully for April as well, that it was just a wonderful experience to bring each of our gifts in service of our students, and on a topic that is, invigorates both of us.
Nice.
So there's few more opportunities that I have put in place for this year to work with other people.
Oh, that's so fantastic.
Co-creation is a big theme for me this year.
Yay. Oh, I love it. I really am excited to hear that for you and for those you get to serve with those efforts. And so grateful to you for generously sharing your story and your experiences navigating a difficult time that, I think is so helpful to be able to relate to. I know just in this conversation, I have a lot of takeaways that I want to reflect on and think more about myself, and encourage listeners to consider that for themselves as well. If there's one piece of inspiration that this conversation has sparked within you, identifying something that you can do with that and sharing it with a friend, because it's, always better when we can not just co-create, but have that accountability and support and know we're not alone, know we're accepted.
Absolutely. And I want, part of my sharing this in this forum is to normalize these conversations.
Yeah.
To make it okay for us to have these conversations. And so I hope that that's the outcome of this interview.
Me too. That I couldn't agree more. And Anjali, if somebody wants to reach out to you to connect with you or PPL Coach after this interview, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so they can always connect with me on LinkedIn, follow me there, or go to my website, ppl-coach.com, and you can see other stuff that I offer and connect with me there as well.
Great. And we'll, of course, include those links in the show notes. And thank you again so much, Anjali, and thank you to our listeners. If you would like to check out other episodes of Co-Creators in Conversation, you can visit the rosabellaconsulting.com website. Sign up to get email notices when new episodes are released, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel. So thank you for listening, and thank you again, Anjali, for sharing your story with us today. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Ariana.